And that's what I'm saying. It's like a belief can hurt other people because when you establish that you are right and then you don't have any boundaries, that's when you start hurting other people.
Welcome to Voices of Deconversion. We share the inspirational stories of deconversion told by former Christians who are now atheist or agnostic. Our stories remind us we're in it together. They encourage us as we discover who we are and help us to embrace who we become. Now here's Steve with today's guest.
Welcome back, everyone, for episode 54. My guest today has a really unique and fascinating story. Both of her parents came from Korea, her mom from North Korea, and she talks about how her parents became Christian when they're from a traditionally non-Christian country. Her parents immigrate to the United States via South America when she's a child, and she talks about some really unique experiences that she has as a Korean American immigrant. Some of the things I found most fascinating were some of the Korean superstitions, and she talks about the Confucian philosophy and things like that were really unique to her experience. But of course, she has very typical Christian experiences as well, proselytizing, and actually was forced to speak in tongues at church retreats. She talks about what it's like when she goes to seminary, and one of the first things that she hears people say is, "Let's go out for a beer," and how surprising that was to her. Church history is something that opens her eyes. She serves as a youth pastor, but all this time she talks about how stress and depression were something that were always there. She shares a story about how her mother kind of secretly talked to her husband at the time, who was not a Christian, and kind of convinced him to baptize her son without her knowledge. That's a really interesting part of her story, and how she responded to that. She's been a teacher for, I think she said, 24 years in the state of Georgia. And some of her experiences, for those who were from the South, probably this wasn't surprising, but some of the things she talks about, the different ways that Christianity kind of infiltrates the public schools, I found really shocking, but I guess I shouldn't be surprised. So some of those stories are really interesting, and I really enjoyed hearing about these different experiences that she's had as a public school teacher. She's a big traveler. And something I thought was really neat is that she mentions how she now helps new immigrants register to vote. And I thought that was really cool. And before I introduce her, just a quick message that I'm going to be taking a break for about a month from the podcast. I will publish the next episode on January 15th. I know my episodes have been coming out every probably 2.5 weeks to maybe 3 weeks sometimes. My goal is to go every other week, but there's been lots of stuff going on, and I'm planning to put out a little special mini episode just to kind of update everybody on 2019. The podcast is still going strong. I'm really enjoying it, but I'm going to tweak a few things, and just want to kind of let everybody know and update everybody about all of that, and give you a little tease about some of the future episodes I have, including one with Everyone's Agnostic host, Cass Midgley. So that will be coming out in January on the 15th. So without any further ado, absolutely loved this conversation. Had so much fun talking to her, and what a unique experience she has. It was just really great to hear her story and meet her. So without any further delay, here is my interview with April Choi. Today I am talking to April Choi. April, welcome to the Voices of Deconversion podcast.
Yeah, glad to be here. And I have to say, I love all your programming, and it has really given me insight to my journey. And I love the way you're very respectful, and you're great in your interviews with the questions you ask.
Well, that's really nice of you to say. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Well, do you consider yourself an atheist or an agnostic, or is there a term that you prefer to use if you had to use a term?
Yeah, I'm still, I say I'm a naturalist more than a humanist, because I believe that I love animals and nature as well. Mm-hmm. And I'm also an evolutionist. Okay. I feel like I'm changing all the time. with every conversation. And after our conversation today, I'll probably evolve.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I hope to do.
That's cool. That's a really nice perspective to have. Well, how did Christianity influence you when you were growing up?
Okay, so should I start with my parents or you want me
Sure.
to start with
Yeah, if you'd
me?
like to. Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to, because my mother's journey has been pretty interesting, and she's been like a big influence on me as far as religion goes. My father too, though.
Yeah.
Well, my mother is from when Korea was one. My mother was from the north part of Korea,
Oh, wow.
and her story is pretty interesting. And her grandmother was converted by United States, Protestants, the missionaries. And this is while she was in North Korea, part of North Korea when it was all one. And my mother would tell me as a little girl how she just hated to go to church because it would be like freezing cold and, you have to walk miles and miles to get to the church. I know we all have that story. I tell that story to my son. You have to walk miles to go to school.
Uphill in the
But
snow, yeah.
I mean, but I think for her it was true. And her father did not attend church, and her mother passed away when she was a little girl, so she didn't have any influence from her
Mm-hmm.
mother. Um, and so, like growing up, I think when she finally fled North Korea,
Mm-hmm.
to South Korea, she wanted to be a nun. She really wanted to devote her life to God. And she said she loved watching the nuns walk by with their habits and, the way they were dressed. And she thought it was just so incredible. Um, but all along, all her life, I think she never found her value as a woman. And she just was treated horribly, I think, through her experiences. But
Yeah.
that's what I know about my mom and her past, and her grandmother was a big force as far as religion goes. It's just she was a big force. Um, and my father, his father used to house North Korean Christians that were escaping from North Korea
Oh,
during,
wow.
and so that's how my father knew of Christianity, because these North Koreans would go to service and then he would kind of follow them to wherever they were having their service.
Oh, interesting.
Isn't that
So
interesting?
these were people like Christians in North Korea who were trying to escape to South Korea.
Yes, yes. There were like a lot of, I don't know the numbers, but just a lot of them just quickly escaping down to the south when
So he was like letting them live in his house and stuff?
his father was letting him
Okay.
so my grandfather was letting them, stay in their
Okay.
house. And believe me, I visited my grandfather's house. It's not a house like you think, it's a hut. But,
Wow.
then us inside the hut, there's like a little space, and that's where he would house them.
Wow.
Yeah, it
That's
was very,
amazing. Yeah.
it's pretty amazing. So that's where his first, experience with Christianity was. So he's kind of like first generation. My mother was kind of second generation,
Mm-hmm.
and both Presbyterian, because in Korea, Presbyterians dominated the ministry, the missions from the
Okay.
U.S. Yeah. Presbyterians and Methodists, they're the largest group of missionaries that came to the United States in North Korea, in Korea in general.
Just in general, yeah.
Yeah, just in general, because you'll see them in history in the 1800s. They were all along the east coast of, no, sorry, the west coast of Korea,
Hmm.
up
Interesting,
and
yeah.
down and south.
Wow, what a family history, like the grandparents and your parents, like this is yeah, it's pretty rich. Lots of amazing things happening just in day-to-day life.
Oh, yeah, yeah, it's crazy. I mean, my mother was in constant fear of war because first it was, they were, the Japanese annexed Korea, so she lived under that rule where she couldn't use her name. She had to have a Japanese name, and so all of her, her own self-worth was just, taken
Wow.
away. And then came the Korean War. So it's like she's been through two wars.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And then I was very curious as to how she became Christian. Korea in general, is not a Christian country in history, historically. They're almost like a country of no religion, but have been ruled by so many different cultures that it's like they quickly had to change their beliefs.
Like adapt and adjust to whoever was ruling them or whatever.
Exactly, and whoever bribed them, like when the Christian missionaries came, they would say, "Well, if we believe in God, we have the same kind of villas that you live in, and all those shiny silver utensils that you use, and Oriental rugs from all over the world." And they said, "Yeah, sure." And so, yeah, so a lot of them got lured into um, being like American. They
Yeah.
wanted to be American and have those because it was a desolate place back then.
Yeah.
There wasn't much there.
So that's how your parents got exposed to Christianity. It is interesting to hear because Korea is not like traditionally it wasn't a Christian country. So it's interesting to hear how the Western influence kind of came and
Yeah,
began to kind of influence just people, leaving the North, and then
yeah,
just these missionaries, exposing Koreans to this Western faith. And then
right.
it's always amazing to me that it sticks,
Yeah,
with other countries and other cultures. It's really interesting.
it's fascinating. I mean, since I've been going through this journey, it's been really fascinating to me how it's because they didn't want to be part of the Japanese, they wanted to take on this other religion. So it was almost like as though in spite of other beliefs, they chose this belief and then
Yeah.
clung on to it. So I mean, there are different statistics out there. Like today, the statistics show that Christianity and Catholicism together maybe about 36 to 56. It's a big range, but that's huge
Percent?
in Korea. Percent.
Really?
Yeah, it's huge.
Wow. That is
Yeah.
huge. I would never have guessed that.
Yeah, even in Georgia, when I first got here, there might have been 60 Korean churches, and now I think it's like up to 200. Like
That's
in every
that's
quarter.
that's nuts. I mean, we had like when I was growing up, we had a Korean church that used our facility, like used our church or whatever. So like we would hold our services, and then they'd have their service on a different day or a different time.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
wow,
Yeah.
yeah. So it's really grown like a lot in that community, in that culture, even outside
Yeah.
of Korea. Yeah,
Yeah. And interestingly enough, the younger generation, though, are starting to decrease in numbers. So we'll see, you
yeah,
know?
yeah. It's ever shifting, this landscape of religious stuff. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah. It is. It is. You think it's more like a fad? I don't know.
I don't yeah, I do too. Like when I deconverted around 2005, 2006, and shortly thereafter considered myself an atheist, but it wasn't right away. And then all the books came out with Dawkins and Hitchens and Harris, and all these atheists were really in the news, and I thought, I had just deconverted, so I thought, oh my gosh, maybe this is like a movement,
Oh,
that's like starting, and like a huge wave of people deconverting. And I do think there's a lot of people doing that, but I think it kind of goes. I don't know that it's gonna like. I mean, who knows? Like Europe's really secular, so it's hard to know. If we'll end up like Europe, or if we'll kind of stay in this like in between space where we still have a strong group of religious people, kind of as the majority.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm curious to see that too, because when I was in New Zealand, just a couple weeks ago, I didn't see like huge crosses every corner and churches every corner like
Interesting.
I expected, and
Yeah,
well, I live in the South, so it's like every street.
yeah.
corner. Anyway, so I was brought up like in my house. Our house was a church for a long time,
Oh wow.
where we would have services and people over on Saturdays, and everything was about church. until my parents they found a young pastor, and then kind of groomed him because he lived with us.
Mm-hmm.
And then my parents owned a factory, and they converted one of the factories into a church.
Oh, wow.
That became the church for years to come. Even after we left, it's still a church.
Wow,
It's
that
crazy.
they really got into their faith. Like they really took it on. Like you said, your mom wanted to be a nun, and then I mean, this became a big part of their life.
It did. It did. Everything was about church. We had Bible studies at home, and we had to go around the table and read. It was hard because it was either the King James Version or the Korean version. So it was like, holy cow. So, reading was like, it was really tough.
Intense. Yeah.
It was
King
so
James, man,
intense.
oh man. Yeah.
So, there was church Sunday mornings, there was church afternoon and evenings, there was church on Saturday and Wednesday nights. Yeah, and so we even worshiped in other people's homes. And this is what I thought all Koreans did.
Wow.
And then on top of that Christianity, I had to deal with Korean superstition and, Confucius philosophy, like you can't write with your left hand, you can't use a red pen because your parents would die. You had to respect your elders and never address them by their name. And when you got married, women kept their name,
Okay.
their maiden name. So, just a lot of different, it was like a mishmash of Christianity and
Yeah.
superstition.
That's really interesting. So the those are real things, like don't write with a red pen.
Yes, yes. And it's very prevalent today. Like if you write with red, your parents would die, so you can't write with red.
Wow.
I haven't done research on that,
Yeah. Yeah,
but
but
it
it's
is.
just kind of common.
It's very common, and
Wow.
you can't use your left hand to write like you. I bet you there are so many poor left-handed kids who are forcing themselves to write with their right hand.
Yeah. Wow. That is so interesting. It's always fascinating to me to hear about hearing how some of my past guests have been from Africa or from like the Caribbean, or they've had that kind of influence, and
Yeah.
just hearing about the kind of how those superstitions were infused with Christianity. It's so fascinating because so many Christians just think that their version of Christianity is just kind of your Presbyterian or Protestant Christianity is just the way that it is everywhere. But you find out that every culture kind of makes it their own.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so true. And when I was a child, we lived in South America. So, we were like assumed the church again. Like my parents opened up a church, and even when we were in South America, that was when I was very, very young.
Wow.
And my parents were deacons. And eventually my parents wanted to immigrate to America. So they left us with a pastor and his family.
Mm-hmm.
And so we lived with them until they were able to get it together in the United States and bring us over. So we were there alone for about 6 months with a family and, pastor's family.
So what your parents were like church planning,
Mhm.
like going around? Were they going around the world and doing that, or was that
No,
just?
no, no, no. It was just because I think they just thought maybe there was a better life in the United States,
Mm-hmm.
and the route was South America. And so the intent was to just whiz through South America, but we ended up staying there for about 5 years.
While your parents kind of got settled in the U.S.
And then
Okay.
they went to the U.S., found a way to get to the U.S.
Okay.
My father got a working visa and had to kind of work towards getting our papers.
Okay.
And so when he finally got that done, then we were able to
Wow.
immigrate.
Yeah, but it was a big, long journey. I mean,
It was, yeah, it was a long journey. And he's the first one of all his relations. And so is my mother. Nobody has ever left the United States back in the This was in the late 60s.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Wow. It's interesting journey, and just having been influenced so much by like all of the wars over there and stuff. It's a different life. Like we don't deal with that kind of stuff really. It's not the same because we're sending people overseas a lot of times. It must have been just very impactful for them, yeah.
The stories I'm trying to write a book. I'm on chapter 6 right now, my mother's story, and I don't know. I'm hoping in her lifetime I'll finish this, but just crazy stories. It's just, and I have to ask her over and over again just in case to see if she didn't make it up because it sounds so crazy.
So crazy, yeah. Well, how old were you when you finally immigrated to the United States?
The United States, I was like 5 years old.
Okay,
5 or
really
6.
young then, yeah.
Yeah, I was very young. Yeah. So, but when I moved into New York, that's where we lived in the city.
Okay.
Church was still everything. You couldn't buy anything on Sundays. I don't know where that's in the Bible, but my father said you couldn't buy anything on Sundays.
Yeah.
And,
well, the Sabbath, I mean, like that's a really old-fashioned, like a couple generations back, like everything was closed on Sundays,
Yeah.
It just you don't work on Sunday, that whole thing.
Right.
Yeah.
So he said that, and we believe that. And in elementary school, when we finally moved to Queens, because my parents were able to buy a house, in the schools, in public school, we used to sing religious songs. Do you remember religious songs in public school?
Oh my gosh, no, not in public school at all. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Michael rowed the boat ashore, hallelujah, and it was just like everyday thing.
Well, my son's in choir and they sing lots of religious choir songs.
Yeah.
Even though it's public school, so that happens.
Right. It happens. And so when I was like in 4th grade, I had a piano teacher who was Catholic, and she didn't go to church. And I was shocked because she was Korean. I didn't think I thought all Koreans were Presbyterians.
That's so funny.
I did. I was in this bubble. I thought all Koreans were Presbyterians and all Koreans went to church. And when I saw that she didn't and she was Catholic, it was like, I didn't think any more of it. I just thought that was very,
peculiar.
Unusual and peculiar. Yeah. But yet, she was a beautiful person and, kind, and I loved her. And then my other kind of experiences is we had a meat market in Queens,
mm-hmm.
and occasionally you would go by there and the store would be closed because the people there had to pray during the day. Oh. And now I know they're Muslims, but before I didn't know they were Muslims. But they would have the rug there and they would pray and close the meat market. And then pass by there some other time, a couple hours later, it would be open, So that's when I think I just started kind of getting introduced to, there's more out there than, what we have.
Yeah.
And the other crazy thing is I was in 5th grade. Was it 5th grade? Yeah, and Miss Summers, she would always want us to sing, Christian songs. She was like she must have been the music teacher for the entire school because we were in a small school. And I didn't think she liked me enough for some reason. And she told me I couldn't sing. So to this day, I still remember that.
Wow. That's crazy that teachers say things like that.
I
know. Really?
I can't believe they do that.
I know.
So she said I couldn't sing, and I was like, oh man, she does not like me. But one day I brought like a field trip money or something mm-hmm. in a tithing envelope, mm-hmm. and the envelope was like a Presbyterian kind of tithing envelope. It's like I don't know, you buy it at the Christian store or something, I guess. But I had that, and that's what I gave her the field trip money in.
Okay.
And since then, she was like, oh, you're Presbyterian. I was like,
oh.
And I was like, wow. I guess.
Yeah, so like you're happy because you're on her good side, but like it's just nuts that she's mean to people. She's mean to children until she finds out they're Christian.
Yeah.
Something. Yeah.
Isn't that crazy?
That's just weird.
It was just, and it's so, I still remember it as clear as day.
Yeah.
And this was in 5th grade. I must have been like 11 years old.
Those things stick with you for some reason. Those years growing up, like they stick with us for so long. We remember
Yeah,
those moments, you know.
yeah. And the child, when you're a child, you're really soaking everything in.
Yeah.
I just I mean, in light speed than as an adult.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And things just like never leave. Like you remember those moments for so long sometimes.
No.
Yeah. Well, so this is like as you're growing up, you're having these moments, these
Yeah,
encounters.
right.
How would you have? So you were Presbyterian. Um,
Yep.
would you have? Did you, as you grew up, did you feel like you had a personal relationship with God? Is that how you would think it would have thought about it? That's how like me and like a lot of certain types of Christians will talk about it, but not all Christians talk about it that way. Is that something that was a part of your Christianity?
Yeah, I mean, it was like, we prayed over our meals. Everything was about God. But, as a teenager, I had a lot of international friends with
Mm.
different beliefs. And, but I always thought it was a Korean thing, oddly enough, so it didn't occur to me, oh, these people believe in different things and, to ask, why. But I always was aware. I think I was always very curious and aware.
Mm-hmm.
And even I had friends who didn't go to church, but they all ended up coming to church with me on Sundays. So I had all these like an entourage of friends who would just come to church with me, and it wasn't like as though I was out there proselytizing or anything.
Yeah.
They just ended up at the church,
You were just a
and
friendly person and a good friend or something, and they just decided they'd go with you. And
yeah, and so, but I do remember in the Korean community, we have big brothers and big sisters. We don't call them by, their names. So everybody is big brother and big sister. So these big brothers used to take us to like in front of like ANS, which is, let's say, Macy's down here,
okay.
and proselytize. Like they would give out pamphlets and take their guitar and sing songs. And I remember trying to hide behind the columns because I was so embarrassed, to be out there.
That's really funny. So they would take groups of kids like from the church and go down and do this like proselytizing.
Yeah. We'd go to Flushing, New York, which is a big city, and you know, millions of people just walking, thousands or millions, just walking by. And here we are, he's like singing, and I'm singing and giving out pamphlets.
But you were embarrassed while you did it.
But I was embarrassed while I
Yeah.
was doing it.
And
Yeah,
about how old were you then?
I was in my teens. I would say
Okay.
about 12.
Yeah. Old enough to
12.
start realizing like this is embarrassing.
This is Yeah, and I mean, some other incredible things is that when around that time too, my mother and father brought over 10, 11 of our relatives from Korea, and
Wow.
they were all like not they didn't all have a religion except one of them did. My aunt, she believed in some kind of a set of Buddhism. It's called Tiger religion. It's like a small subset of Buddhism. But all 11 of them stayed in our house. And that's
Wow.
what, yes, it's very common for people to bring over their relatives and stay with you until
Mhm.
they get kind of established. So eventually my parents found them work in our factory and an apartment, and they went on their own, and my cousins went to school, and yeah, so that was very interesting. But they converted all 10 of them except for
Whoa.
my aunt.
Wow. So all of them
Yeah.
just went along
And
with it.
whoa, you're kidding? Now we have, I think, about 3 ministers in all of our relations, and
Wow.
people went to seminary, and I mean, to that extent,
It's a very, very strong Christian, I guess, thread or Christian
yeah.
influence. It just
And
really
it's
took off in the family.
Presbyterian, always Presbyterian. And my mother would say, oh, they're different, or the Baptists, oh yeah, they're like this. So we even were more exclusive than anything, because now we were Korean and Presbyterian.
That's interesting to hear you say, because I was in a very evangelical, like, I would say it's similar to Baptist, but it was charismatic, where I got into some of that charismatic stuff. But I always thought it was the really conservative, like, evangelical type churches that were more exclusive, like, that kind of thought of every other denomination as not Christian enough. But Presbyterian is kind of like one of the mainline denominations, and I know it can vary even within a denomination how a church is. But it's interesting to hear that even in your experience that there was some of this, well, they're Baptists, well, they're Catholic, they're Christians, but they're not the right kind of Christians.
No, they're not. And there was a Lutheran church next to us, a Seventh-day Adventist, all of them, the gamut. And it was always Presbyterian. Even when we went to like a Korean Methodist church, it felt different.
Just a different feel to it.
It would feel to it, a different liturgy maybe, or a different, process of, I don't know. It was just really, that's how I saw it. That's because my parents were Presbyterian.
Yeah, yeah.
And so we would go to retreats, and when we went to retreats, they would like speak in tongues and things like that too.
Oh, really? In the Presbyterian church?
Yeah.
That's
we would go to retreats, and they would force us to speak in tongues. And I remember so many occasions, not only at the retreat, where the pastor would lay his big hands on my head and pray over me, yelling and screaming, forcing my head down into submission to believe and speak in tongues. And I remember like trying to force myself, and to the point where, like, when you're in a nightmare and you're trying to scream and nobody hears you, and you can't, nothing comes out.
Yeah.
It was that feeling. It was like nothing's coming out, and everyone else, and I'm starting to hear people speaking in tongues, and I'm like, wow, and they turn the lights off. So it's like completely dark, right?
It's kind of creepy.
It's so creepy. But, I didn't know any better. My life of church stands all throughout my life. Like even in my parents' factories, we had mostly Hispanic workers and maybe a few Koreans. Mm-hmm. And even there, my father, I would see him praying over the workers, like on occasion.
Wow. Yeah. So
it was all over.
Just in everything. Yeah.
In everything. And, as a teenager, that's when I started thinking about, my body image. And my brothers would say, my big brothers, not my biological brothers, but the big brothers in church, they would say, oh, you're too thin. And I would be like, oh, really? So I would purposely try to gain weight. And I would see myself like week after week, and then ask them, am I good now? Now that I've gained some weight.
Oh, wow.
And then they would say, oh yeah, it's good now. And I remember clearly those discussions with body image.
That's crazy. I can't believe that kind of conversation like happened, like that they were so bold to say that to someone,
Yeah, and I distinctly remember I'm in a room, like maybe a room, and it's like maybe full of maybe 6 or 7 people, and I'm saying this and they're responding, and it's almost like, because we, growing up, big brothers are our mentors. And
was it like big brothers and big sisters, or was it just the men who were the big brothers?
I think for some reason, no, they're big sisters also.
Yeah, that's what. Okay.
Yeah, but I think because as a teenager, at that time of your life as a girl growing into a woman, I think that's why, I don't know, I needed their approval or their, I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
And I remember that's when I started getting into like depression because of my body image. you know.
Yeah, and it seems like that's a common thing that
It's,
happens, especially for young women. That in this culture, it just seems to be something that is prevalent.
yeah, isn't it?
Yeah,
And I felt guilty, and like sex was a no-no. It's like if you're a Christian, you don't have sex until you're married.
yeah.
That was pretty standard. And yeah, so
Holy
that was
smokes.
my teenage that was my teenage life. It was.
Mm-hmm. How did your Christianity become personal, or was it just something that was kind of just around you and you were just kind of going along with it?
Yeah, at that time it was just kind of around me and I was going along with it. But
Yeah.
I did truly believe that, I feared God and I feared my parents and I
Mm-hmm.
did everything that, they told me to do. Um, and when I went to college, I was surrounded by Christians there in a public college,
Okay.
state college. But when I left college because my parents just left, they got into financial difficulty and had to move to Florida. Like it was like sudden.
Wow.
Sold everything. Our house was under not what do you call it? It was for sale, and
Okay.
my brother was handling. Um, my brother was left alone, so I decided to come back and help him out. So at that time, um, I got a job and I decided, then my brother eventually moved to Florida, but I decided to stay. And within like 6 months, I got laid off and I couldn't find anywhere to live. So I went to live with my aunt, the one that's a non believer, the one that
Ah,
believed in
the
tiger
tiger
worship,
religion.
tiger religion.
Okay.
So that was very interesting because I was staying with her. And sometime of the day, I passed through this room, one of her rooms, and it was dark, except for this idol with an altar and lights. It freaked me out.
Oh no.
It freaked me out because those are the things that Christianity has been telling us, fear of all idols, right?
Yeah.
And can't put any other God before me, right?
Right.
So I'm like, oh my gosh, she's like worshiping the devil. And I was traumatized. I was like, I gotta get out of this apartment. So in dread, I moved to Florida to be with my family.
Oh
I
wow.
left New York because I had no job at this point and I couldn't afford an apartment anymore. So I went back and lived with my parents at that time.
Okay.
And that was my first like real fear of the devil.
And you were how old around that time?
19.
19. Yeah. So just getting out on your own. And then but
Mm-hmm.
that spooked you so much that you felt like you needed to get out of that area, like out of
Out
that
of
space.
out of her apartment, yeah.
Yeah.
And she was like, "Why do you have to leave?" And I was like, I just have to go back, to my parents."
Wow.
And yeah, it was really spooky. It spooked me out, because I was just told all my life that was the devil,
Yeah. Yeah, that
That
kind of
was,
thing gets embedded in you, and then yeah,
yeah,
that kind of stuff can be very.
it
it
was so
gets so
hard.
superstitious sometimes. The
Yeah,
Christianity, yeah,
it is. So I moved to Florida, and my gosh, Florida was another level of Christianity. Because in Florida you have Christian music. I started listening to Sandy Patty, Immigrant, Michael W. Smith, and I'm like, oh my God, there's a world or a whole state of Christianity. And so, of course, my parents already had a church established. So I was attending that church. And again, I not converted friends purposely, they all just followed me to church.
mm-hmm.
These people are
It's really
people
funny.
who are not even Korean. They followed me to church. So, and then I was I was given the job of directing the children's Sunday school department. Like in the Korean church, most Korean churches, what they do is they have a adult service, And at the same time, they have a children's service.
Okay.
So the children's service is separate from the adult service, and it's run just like the adult service.
Oh, just like it. See, we had
Just
children's service, but it was not anything like the adult
No, it
service.
was just like the adult service. We had our own offering time, we had our own worship time, we had our own sermon time. Then we would break up in little groups according to their levels and have Sunday school. So I was put in charge of the whole children's school department,
Oh, wow.
and I was running it. But I had my friends who were not even Korean teaching Sunday school, and I was doing this for like, I don't know, for a year or so while I was there. And in the meantime, I was going to college and got my degree in psychology and sociology.
Oh, cool.
So I completed that. And then I thought, well, what do I do with my life? And I found out that people get paid for doing what I was doing at the church. And I was like, oh, this is an actual occupation. So I
Yeah.
started in like a Bible course. And at that time, when I was taking the Bible course, my depression and the pressures of getting ready for church,
Mm-hmm.
Saturdays and Sundays were my worst days. I would get very depressed on Saturdays. And then by Sunday, it was like the performance time.
Oh,
It was like all in preparation for the Sunday.
wow. So you basically like you let it all out and you really put on a maybe a facade or something to try to like get through Sunday.
Yeah,
You do what you're supposed to do, and then the rest of the week is like recovery time almost.
exactly. I didn't think about that, but that's
Wow.
exactly what it was. Because that's what I would do. And I got into this depression when I was going to the Baptist seminary to take a class. I met a friend, and he suggested I go to pastoral counseling.
Hmm.
And so that was my first time I met a therapist.
Had you opened up to this friend, and that's why they knew that you needed that counseling would be helpful?
He somehow, I think maybe he somehow saw I was depressed and suggested I should go
Okay.
see this therapist. I mean, it
Yeah.
was very intuitive of him, I think, because I didn't know him for a long time. We were just going to class together, and that's where I met him.
That is really interesting. That's kind of neat. I mean, that's amazing to me that people are that insightful. Like,
Yeah.
especially if you
Me
guys
too,
were just
because
acquaintances, you know.
yeah, because to this day I can't say like we had a conversation or a deep conversation. I know we were trying to we never got romantic because I was afraid because he was white. He was American, and I didn't think my parents would accept him. So when he would drop me off, he would have to drop me off at the gates of the subdivision so I could walk to the house. Isn't that crazy?
So, wow. So, because you like, there was no way you wanted your parents seeing this guy because that would cause an issue. I have one of my friends is Korean and from
Really?
college, and he may be listening to this because I know sometimes he listens, but he'll know who I'm talking about. But he's talked to me so many times about how like he can't date. His parents are like, you have to date a Korean woman, and like if he dates anyone who's not Korean, like they get really upset.
Oh yeah, my
And it's
brothers
a
have.
frustration for him, I think, you know?
It is
Yeah.
because my brothers went through that, and ultimately they did find a Korean person to marry. But I had to leave him on the gate, and I was like, sorry, you can. And of course, he felt that. I'm sure that bothered him, but we can just remain friends. And so, um, it was like the therapy was really good because we started talking about options of my career and what was bothering me and how I felt like I always had to be this perfect person.
Hmm.
And, so I think she's the one who actually led me to get out of Florida to go to seminary out of Florida. And so I started applying to different seminaries
Okay.
up north. And I found Georgia. In Georgia, there's this seminary called Columbia Seminary,
Okay.
and they accepted me. And so I decided, okay, so I packed my stuff and left all my worldly belongings because I thought I was going to be in this like, monk style of life.
Mm-hmm.
And so I make it to Georgia. And the first day I'm there, they're all like, let's go out for a beer, the seminarians.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. You must have been completely shocked.
I was like, you can do that? Because we were like, no, I haven't touched any kind of alcohol in my entire life.
Yeah.
So I'm like, wow, that's amazing. I didn't think anything bad of it. I was
Yeah.
just like, wow.
Like that's okay? Yeah.
that's okay.
I went to a Bible school, and a lot of the people I went to school with would go on to seminaries and things, and there were a lot of people who drank. I mean, like, not that it's bad, but it was really funny to me because I came from a very conservative worldview where I hadn't touched alcohol all through high school, and
Yes.
because I was so religious,
Yeah,
um,
exactly.
and so it was really an eye opener for me to see Christians who were just like open about it and fine with it. It was really like shocking, but not in a bad way. It just like completely
Yeah,
shocking to me. Like what?
yeah,
Yeah.
right. Like you can do that. I was just like, wow. And they were all like good, nice people. They were
Yeah.
all in seminary. And so I thought, wow. And the funny thing is, I met a couple of Korean seminarians while I was there, and they would tell me, no, those American seminarians are different than us.
Oh,
I was
interesting.
like, really? But I never hung out with the Korean seminaries. I thought the other guys were fun, more fun. So I would
That's
hang
so
out with
funny.
them. But it was interesting. So that was kind of my first eye opening to kind of different, more, I guess, I don't know.
Different ways of living out Christianity.
Yeah.
It's interesting to hear the different divisions. The some of the Korean seminarians were keeping separate from some of the other seminarians, and that's not, I'm sure, not the only division within groups like that, but it is interesting how even within a small group of really people concentrated on one purpose, seminary, like we just divide. That's just what we do, I guess,
Divide.
as
Yeah.
people. Yeah.
So it's keep dividing and dividing, right?
Yeah.
So I'm like, wow. And then um, the class of church history, that was the biggest eye opener for me.
Oh
When I
wow.
took church history and learned about the Bible and how the Bible came to be, that it was a compilation of different books and that some of the books didn't make it, and how it was chosen, that was that planted a seed in me. It opened up to me again and again and again. And also Free Will by St. Augustine, where he
Hmm.
talked about free will. I'm sure it wasn't the intent of how interpret it, but I interpreted free will that, oh, we have a choice, and so
Because you were Presbyterian, so it was all like predetermination, predestination.
only some people, like 18%, can get to heaven, even if you believe out of those beliefs.
That's so
So it's
crazy.
all like predetermined, right? And so when he says free will,
Mm-hmm.
I was like, wow,
Free will,
really?
yeah, free will was a big part of my belief, and so it was really foreign to me, this idea that Christians believe that God chose some and didn't choose others. It was really totally foreign to me.
Yep.
So, but
Yeah.
that for you was your normal. That was what you
That
understood to
was
be
my
true.
normal. That was my normal. No matter how much I pray, no matter how good I am, no matter, what I do as a Christian, at the end, I might not even get to heaven.
That's crazy. How did you even feel okay with that? Like that would make me feel so like this isn't fair. That's how I
Yeah.
would feel. Did you just accept it, not think too much about it, or?
Yeah, I don't think I thought of, because I didn't learn scripture as, in like a seminary. I used to, like, since I was 18, I used to do keep a journal
Mm-hmm.
of like a scripture a day and then kind of like dissect that scripture. But I was very, how you say, I wasn't allowed to really interpret it or decipher it for myself. I just took it as verbatim,
Okay.
and then with that scripture, how do I live according to that? That's I was a very obedient type of um, Christian.
Okay, so you were just taught to just let it be? Is that what you
Yep.
mean? Like you were
Everything is just let it be, just accept it. Don't question it. Um, if you are, if you try to be like, oh, and as a woman, don't be too educated. That type of role.
and were these just things that you understood to be true and so you stopped trying to dissect scripture, or was it someone said something because they knew you were trying to understand it better?
No, I think it was just ingrained from me from so early on that,
Yeah.
um, women are just supposed to just take it, or Christians are supposed to just accept it
Yeah.
without question.
Okay.
That's the way I was taught. Even when I was working, I was working in the library at the seminary. I guess it was, for like work study or something. And they would have NPR on the entire time. And so subliminally, I'm listening to NPR the entire time I'm working in the library.
That's
And,
hilarious.
it was just it was very bizarre to me. It was a new world to me. And
Well, this seminary, was it what denomination was it, or did it have one?
it was Presbyterian.
Okay, but it was a very different type of Presbyterian.
Yes, in the
All
Presbyterian
right.
church, there are two sects. There's the PCA and there's the PCUSA. Okay. The PCA is the very conservative Presbyterian church. The PCUSA are the liberal. I came from the PCUSA under that umbrella when I was in the Korean church, but
Okay.
they treated it like PCA, which is very conservative.
Okay.
So it didn't matter whether we were PCUSA or what, we were still going to act very conservative and very literal.
Wow.
But at the seminary, they were PCUSA, which was a very liberal Presbyterian church. So,
Yeah, so they were fine with drinking and they had NPR on, and
yeah,
that's
yeah.
similar to my kind of experience coming from a more conservative religion, and then I went to an ELCA Lutheran school, or it was predominantly like a lot of the teachers were ELCA, which is just like Evangelical Lutheran Church of America or something like that. But
Yeah.
it was the liberal wing of the Lutheran Church. Like the Lutherans have their conservative,
Okay.
and I didn't know anything about Lutherans at all. So I was like from a very conservative Covenant Church was the name of the denomination,
All
um,
right.
but so it was also eye opening to learn that some of them were okay with people like being gay. Like that was not
Uh-huh.
okay when I grew up. Like that was
Yeah.
just a sin. And learning that some of these pastors believe that, and then I started to learn about the Bible, and some of these pastors were like totally fine with, or teachers or whatever were fine with errors in the Bible, and that was just so shocking to me. So I'm associating a lot with what you're saying about kind of discovering, oh, there's this like more progressive way of being a Christian, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
And that kind of was interesting to me because I think I've always been a curious person, always, and I just it was very interesting. But within the first I think few months that I worked there, I got a knock on the door on my dorm door, and it was this Pentecostal pastor, and he wanted to be a youth pastor at his church.
Oh,
And so I took it on. It was a small church of like maybe 150 people,
okay.
and I was there, and week by week, it was just weird to me because they were speaking in tongues and they were loud and very different than the way I was raised all my Presbyterian life, right?
Yeah.
Because very calm and like you don't say boo, and so it was very different, and I just didn't feel right. So eventually, and I loved him. I mean, he
I
was a
was,
great pastor.
yeah.
I love the people, but it just the whole thing just didn't feel right. I guess I was out of my comfort zone.
Yeah.
You know? So I searched for No, I didn't think I searched. I got another invitation to a Presbyterian church, and this was a larger church. It was like about 500 people. And so that's where I became a youth pastor
Okay.
for the next 4 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, first year I'm in seminary, and I'm getting knocks on my door. And I also got a knock on my door to be a guest speaker in Kentucky in this other Presbyterian church. It's
Wow.
like, yeah, it was going really good.
Yeah. Things are starting to take off. You're starting to come into your own and feel like this is, I mean, were you feeling like this is like the right path for me? This is what I'm
Yeah,
going to do.
yeah. I was still feeling very sick to my stomach on Saturdays, and
That's
yeah,
so fascinating to
I
me.
was still very. It was like Saturdays were, especially Saturday night, were like the worst days of my
Oh,
life.
man.
It was this preparation for Sunday. So I've been living in this, state. I was living in this state. Yeah, I mean, I'm now what 24 years old, and I'm still living in that state of just sick to my stomach on Saturdays.
I've always, whenever people say things like that, I find it so fascinating because it's like the body is responding to
Ah,
stressors, or it's
yes,
responding to the anxiety or whatever it is in your mind that's bothering you. And
yeah,
I think for me, when I was having physical symptoms of like physical problems, um, I think it was related to my deconverting, but it's sometimes you can't put your finger on it in the moment, you know?
yeah.
I just find it fascinating that the body's responding to something that maybe your mind is blocking out, you know? I don't know if
I
that's true for you. I don't want to speak for you, but like it's like the mind is blocking out the bad stuff, but the body still is responding to the stress or
Oh,
something.
no, for sure, for sure. Because I would a lot of times go to church like maybe have slept like 2, 3 hours. And then once the whole performance was done, I was able to relax by the evening. But it was hard
You'd sleep 2 or 3 hours the night before?
the night before.
Wow. Yeah, you
Yeah,
were really stressing about what was
it was
happening on
really
Sunday.
stressful. Yeah, and
Okay. So all
you know,
this
I
is happening at the same time that you're feeling that things are starting to look good for you on the outside.
On the outside, yeah. So, of course, my parents are like thrilled and, they just think, the world of me and, oh my goodness, she's giving her life to God. And yeah. And so I was doing that. And at the same time, my degree, I went to the seminary to get a youth ministry degree. It was a specific youth ministry degree. It was abolished. That following year, they said it was going to be abolished. And I had two choices to continue my degree in either an MDiv, get an MDiv, which is Master of Divinity, to become a minister, which I had no intent, and or to study theology.
Hmm.
And that didn't appeal to me either. I don't know
Yeah.
why. It just didn't appeal to me. So I left seminary, but I was still working at the church. And so then I decided, I left the seminary and I moved into an apartment, not an apartment, but a house. And this lady rented me 2 rooms to live in. And I lived there for quite some time. But
But you had to basically drop out of seminary, so that was essentially grad school. So you had to drop out of that.
mhm,
Okay.
yeah.
And were you troubled by that? Like, were you worried about what you were going to do? And because that was kind of your path, was to do the youth ministry stuff, and then all of a sudden that was not an option.
Hmm. Yeah, I don't know. I think I was just kind of trying to work it out. So I started getting odd jobs like, I was working at Quick Weight Loss and funny instance, okay. So I was very still religious. So I
Yeah.
would have scriptures on the wall in my office at Quick Weight Loss. So, my manager noticed that and she said I had to take it down. And I was like, oh, I didn't realize it was a bad thing to have scripture on the wall.
How funny.
And then I started being a teacher assistant, and even then I was trying to indoctrinate students. like not telling them to believe in God, but just in like, I don't know, just the
Subtle ways, right?
subtle ways that I had, because that was my
Yeah.
belief, you know? And, but then somewhere around there, like the last 2 years of my youth, as a youth pastor, I started to read the Bible literally and thought, I don't believe in some of this stuff.
Wow.
I can't preach this to my children at Sunday. So I started to edit the Bible as I was preaching it. And I started taking off the things that I didn't believe in, as far as, original sin, you're a sinner, you're going to go to hell, that kind of stuff I all removed. And I would tell them more like a story. So I would pick and choose the stories without the condemnation.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I started to do that for the last 2 years, and at the same time, drama was starting to happen at the church.
Okay.
There was a time where they wanted me to do a special, uh, I don't know, talk to the
Okay.
congregation, to the adult congregation, about children, and I did. After I did, I got chastised by the pastor because he said I was addressing the adults. And so
Really?
suddenly I thought, now the other the youth pastors who are males have done that and it didn't bother them. But suddenly I'm doing that and then I'm not supposed to address the adults. So I was like, that's that's when I started seeing like a lot of double standards within that realm, because most people just come to church and leave. So they don't see all the drama that goes on inside the ministry with the pastors and the elders and the deacons. That's another inner circle.
Yeah, yeah, that's definitely something that I don't think a lot of people have any clue about. And when you start to learn about that stuff, it's a little bit eye opening, because it's just real people with like having real problems, and there's the infighting, and it's just as bad as any business or group of people that ever has gathered for anything. It's just like everything
Right.
else. There's people that don't like each other, and yeah. Well,
Right. So
what were you talking about that was addressing the adults?
I was talking about different personalities, and not about parenting per se, but I was talking about different personalities. So I had like different stuffed animals up there, and I said, all of us have different personalities, and we should look at our children and listen to their unique self, something, according to that.
Yeah,
So it's all about like each child is different and unique, and you can't like put them in a mold or anything like that.
yeah. And so it was this talk that made them uncomfortable with what you were like, the fact that you were telling parents this would be a good way to raise your kids. And so this is where double standards come in. So you think some of the men could give instruction to parents as leaders and it would have been fine.
Right, they would have been fine. Right.
Wow. So yeah, they're
And,
starting to, yeah.
yeah. And then by that time, I start not wanting to go to church, but I'm still going because now I need an income, because I'm like, I don't know what to do with myself, right?
Yeah.
So I'm there and I don't want to go to church. So I begin my teacher certification. I decide, oh, you know what? I want to be a teacher. So go back to school, and I'm getting my teacher degree. And then another drama happens. This new associate young pastor shows up. And then he starts prying into my credentials.
Really?
Yes,
Oh
within
my
like,
goodness.
it was within the first month. He takes me out to dinner, um, as a friendly gesture, but then it really wasn't a friendly gesture, because then I see he must have been conversing with the other deacons and elders about my credential.
Wow.
And so I'm not liking this at all. I'm like, this is not happening for me. And so somehow he talked talk to, so I had a lot of volunteer Sunday school teachers, and they were all, respected me. They were all supportive of me. And they genuinely loved what I did with the children's department because I brought order. The kids were behaving. They were disciplined. And they've never seen anything like that, they told me, even the elder of the children's Sunday school. But then the youth pastor, the associate pastor, the new one, wanted his wife to take over my position. In the end, that's what I found out was the motivation for him to start prying into my credentials. And I was like, this is just so retarded.
Yeah.
I am doing the best that I can and having, I'm doing okay. And here comes this new person in town, and then suddenly we're having conversations, in the office with deacons and elders and the pastor. And I don't want any of this.
It's like it's needless drama, and he was basically aiming to get his wife your job, and it was completely underhanded. Is that the phrase? Just sneaky and devious,
Right. She didn't have like a seminary and background of any sort. I don't even know if she had a degree. I don't even know what she did. But anyway, I was just like, I felt attacked, and I'm starting to realize now with my status is, all these challengers are coming, and from men, none of the women, none of the female, they're all like, man, I can't believe this is happening to you. This is just not right.
Yeah, and like out of nowhere, you're doing everything right, and
and here, so I worked there for a while, and I think I don't even know how I finally left, and I worked at 2 more churches after that, but they still didn't start feeling right. I started wanting to look for something different and more inclusive.
Mm-hmm.
So I started going to like Black churches, all white churches, Hispanic churches, and they didn't even feel right because it was still not a compilation of all cultures.
Everybody was sticking to their own groups.
And the message was within those groups. So I just never felt included. And even when I was at the Korean church, I didn't feel included, believe it or not. I always felt like an outsider because for the first time at this Korean church, they had an American service and Koreans who didn't speak Korean, which I was so baffled by.
Oh, how funny.
So unusual. I've never experienced that before.
Yeah.
So, I was just trying to find my own, I guess. And eventually I found this Unitarian church, and I thought, well, this is interesting. And the guy wasn't a pastor. He was just kind of a good speaker. And he sounded more like, I think, almost like a motivation speaker or something like that. But what the message he gave wasn't anything about condemnation, about scripture. It was more about way of life. And that resonated with me.
Did you know what the Unitarian Church was before you went? Did you know that they were, like, a lot of times they can be really secular?
Yeah, I didn't know anything about it.
Okay.
Somebody had mentioned it, and I said, well, let me try it out. It's very close by to me. And I checked it out, and then he was just a guest speaker. So after that, I stopped going because he wasn't there.
Okay.
Because the other ones,
they weren't as good as him, yeah.
They more sounded like preachy.
Ah, interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So then I completed my teacher certification, and around this time I start dating. I've always been dating. But this time I dated, and I told you sex was a very, taboo. Big no-no.
Yeah.
I finally lost my virginity at age 30, Steve.
Oh, wow. Well, you were a very good Christian.
And I was like, wow, I didn't go to hell.
Yeah, it's amazing. No lightning came from heaven and struck you dead or anything, Life just goes on as normal.
No, but seriously, it was a very big thing for me. It was a big thing for me. You don't know how many guys I just like pushed away, and they just thought, wow, this person is very weird. I'm sure that's what they thought, you know? And
Mm-hmm.
I'm like,
Was it like when it happened, were you troubled by it or were you relieved by it, or what were some of your feelings about it?
well, it was really weird because the guy couldn't perform because he just had like, I don't know, 3 bottles of beer. And and I was like, damn.
That's so funny.
But then afterwards, of course. And what was your question again?
Oh, just like how did you, because you had waited so long, right? Like you this was an important part of being a Christian for you and being a good person. In your mind, this is what. So when you eventually lose your virginity, then that is like, that would be a really big deal, I would think. So was it like a relief, like, okay, that's happened and it's not something that's out there anymore, or was it like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I did this, maybe it was the wrong thing, or
Well, at that time I was going through therapy too, and I didn't feel anything until I met the next person because I was like, oh, now how am I going to tell them that I'm not a virgin?
hmm.
That's when it hit me.
Well, and in our culture, it's held high, like it's something that,
Yeah,
especially
right.
for women, like if a woman's not a virgin, like that
Oh
can
my
have bad
gosh.
connotations, like, or
Right.
in the minds of some people, yeah.
And Steve, I'm 30. Come on, so my therapist was like, you know what? Every time you meet a new person, you're a virgin for them. I was like, oh, I like that concept.
Yeah, that's nice. Well, that was probably really helpful, though.
That was very helpful. So I could just kind of put that out of my mind. And
Yeah.
but anyway, like after that, I went to church a few more times and worked for 2 more churches as a youth pastor. And then so altogether, that was like 6 years of being a youth minister. And one day I just said, I just don't want to go to church anymore. And I swear, the day I left and I didn't make it to church on that Sunday, it was the most liberating feeling ever. I felt like the
Wow.
world just opened up. There was no guilt. It was it was mind blowing. I can't express how I didn't feel sick that weekend. I didn't have to be fake or perform or dress or put makeup on to perfection. It was, it was just incredible feeling. And here I am at now, around 32 years old. And it was just amazing. And so at that point, I'm like, okay, life after church, what do I do now? And I started exploring like different things to do on the weekends instead of,
It's so funny, it's like what normal people should do.
yeah,
Like how do I want to spend my Sunday? Now I have a free day.
I couldn't believe it because it wasn't just Sunday that it was affected. It was always Saturday and Sunday. So it was like I never had a weekend.
Because you were so stressed about Saturday and you were preparing for
Preparing
Sunday.
for Sunday, right?
And
As
then
a
you didn't
youth.
sleep well, and so you weren't really getting rest during the weekends.
Mm-mm. No. And for the first time, I felt this incredible liberation of just freedom.
So
You
it
know,
built and built and built for you, because it seems like, you start to, the Bible got deconstructed a bit for you. Um, you live life a little bit, have some relationships. You see the inner workings of the church and how sometimes it can be kind of, there's
yes.
some infighting. So there's all these things that are sort of kind of being maybe picked at or picked apart. And so do you think it was just a like accumulation of all those things, and then one day you just realize this isn't for me
Oh,
anymore? Or
that sounds like it, man. I mean, can you imagine
yeah.
almost all of my young adult life and teenage years being bottled up like that and always worried about my appearance and how I'm going to perform that day and what I need to wear because you always have to look so good and and that's the thing. And when you go to church, it's like everybody has their Gucci bag and their Louis Vuitton, and And I wasn't that kind of person to begin with. So it was really difficult for me to even get into church fashion. It was
Yeah.
really difficult for me. So yeah, that fakeness just like peeling off was just liberating. And so after that, I joined like this international club where, they would just meet at different restaurants. And that's where I met my first husband, and he was an Indian person and he was Hindu. He wasn't a practicing Hindu, but, Hindu nonetheless.
Yeah.
And so it was very fascinating to me. I traveled to India a couple of times and loved his family and, just got into the culture. But then when I went to visit my mother in Paris and told her that I was engaged to this Indian person, she just fell on the floor and cried and said that he was going to hurt me. And you know what those Indians do? And I was like, what?
Oh no.
So it was just the worst. It was just the worst conversation with her. It was just the worst. And she was influential on my brothers, but not on me. I think I always had this kind of not self-awareness. I really wasn't aware, but I just had just kind of a stubbornness where I knew what I wanted to do,
Yeah.
when I wanted to do it. And so I got engaged, and she came to the wedding, and actually came a day late. I guess
Like, she missed the wedding, or just
no, she almost missed the wedding because she came like almost, I think, either that day or the night before, and she was supposed to come like day before that. And but the ceremony was great. We had like Korean culture in there, and I still had some Christian culture in there. I had some guy singing Christian song, and I had a Hindu part of the ceremony. So, and the Unitarian leader, worship leader, was there. I don't know what you call them because
yeah.
they're not preachers. They're more like, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I like
Do a sermon.
they're leaders, but they're like facilitating the service kind of thing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
an officiant or something. Is that?
Yeah, I think that's what it is, an officiant. So I had a female officiant, and we both agreed on female. And my husband was like, "Oh yeah, that sounds fine." My ex-husband.
Yeah.
That was
Now
my
ex-husband. Yeah.
now ex-husband. So yeah, so
Wow.
that was very. And then I had all my relatives come, and they liked him. And they were very accepting.
That's cool. So was it just your mom or that had the hardest time with everything, or?
Yeah. Well, only my mom that expressed it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Wow.
Yeah, but everyone else seemed to be really into it. They loved the ceremony, and everything seemed to, be for it. But yeah.
What do you think during this time that you were kind of deconverting? It seemed like it was a very long, slow process in some ways. Um, what do you think was the hardest part of all of that? I mean, maybe it was the feeling not feeling well all the time or something, but was there anything that you feel like was the most difficult for you at that time in your life, or?
I think let me see. I think I was so into it on my own. I didn't have any support.
Mm.
So I think that was the most difficult time. I didn't have friends to talk to at that time. I had my therapist. And in fact, my therapist was a nun, an ex-nun.
Oh, wow.
But she would never say, "Oh, let's pray together," or "That's not Christian-like." Or she was never like that. She was very progressive, even if she was a pastoral counselor.
Mm-hmm.
She taught me a lot. As she became my mentor for 10 years.
Oh, wow.
Because of her, I was able to establish kind of a reasonable deconversion. I think the hardest part was just just trying to, like, even today, I feel so fake,
Mm.
around Christians.
You
God,
still feel that you feel fake around Christians now?
yeah, yeah, even
It's-
today. But, it's like with, well, let me go back to my mom because she's
yeah.
such a crazy force. So when we got married, I had my first child, my only child, and somehow she convinced my Hindu husband to take my child to go get him baptized by a Korean Presbyterian minister.
Did you know this was happening?
No, I didn't know this was happening until the day. And I wake up and it's like 10 o'clock, something like that, and they're heading out. And I'm like, what are you guys doing? And, so I think my husband then was like caught between the situation and he didn't know what he had to
Mm.
do, but he just followed my mom. So they ended up going and I didn't even go. So they went, took my son and got him baptized by a Korean Presbyterian minister.
How old was he?
I think he was like maybe 3 weeks old.
Okay.
Yeah, 3 weeks old.
And by the time when you asked them, "What are you doing?" Were they upfront with you and did they
Yeah,
tell you?
yeah, they did. They were up front, but it was just so quick that I couldn't even, I was
Couldn't
just
process it.
still in anger mode and like unbelievable. This is unbelievable
Yeah.
that she would just take something like that into her own. It's like, so she has like issues with boundaries and,
Yeah.
many things. Like when I came home one day and my son was 2, and at that time he established that he's left-handed, my mother was forcing him to eat with his right hand.
That's that left-handed thing that you mentioned at the beginning. That's crazy.
And that's what I'm saying. It's like a belief can hurt other people because when you establish that you are right and then you don't have any boundaries, that's when you start hurting other people. I mean, and I don't know whether to blame her or the way she was raised
Yeah.
or so for the longest time I hated my mother. I really did not like her.
Yeah.
And she even took one of my gifts from my wedding in India. It was a framed sculpture of miniature Hindu gods. It was beautiful. And to this day, I can't replace it. But she hid it. And then next time I asked for it, she said, okay, here it is. And then another time, she broke it and threw it away.
Whoa. That's crazy. I could see, like, that is insane to have to work with, like, a family member like that. Like,
No, and the thing is, I'm her caretaker, so she was living with me, and I wanted to get rid of her so many times. I was like, I said, you're gonna leave this house if you continue doing stuff like that. And she would say things like all throughout her life, because of her own self upbringing, that boys were more valuable. Thank goodness they had a boy. Um, what if you didn't have a boy? It's just, so I really hated her. And
that's intense. That stuff gets kind of ingrained in your mind, and if you're around someone who's constantly telling you how valuable the boys are, and thank God
yeah,
it was a boy, not a girl, and you start,
right.
yeah.
And good thing she had a boy. Oh my gosh, all my children have boys. And I'm like, then what is that to say for this one, niece one granddaughter that she has?
Yeah.
Is she less than the boys? But I don't know, it's just,
It's just
and then
bizarre.
it was bizarre. And when I came out, I didn't like outwardly come out and say, hey, I don't believe in this anymore. And, I never did that. It's just the way I lived, I guess. But my brother, when I had so this is all happening while my son is born now, right?
Hmm.
So my brother now tells me, hey, shouldn't you take your son to church? And I was like, no, I want him to find his own journey, his own way. And my brother became very, very devout around the time I was leaving church. And he started teaching Sunday school. And he was so proud to call me and say, "Hey, I'm following your footsteps." And at that time, I'm like, "Oh, crud.
Oh no.
I'm not there anymore."
Oh no.
So he was so proud of me that and proud of himself to be following my footsteps because he was teaching Sunday school.
Yeah, and so you were in your like, was it early, or you were in your 30s when you deconverted, right?
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
When I outright deconverted, yeah.
That's really interesting because like I had, when I was in high school, like prayed the prayer of salvation with my grandmother.
Yeah.
And so when I deconverted and I told my sister, one of the things she was really upset about was like, well, what about grandma? Like you had prayed with grandma. Not that grandma wasn't saved or whatever, because I think that was just like I think grandma was a Christian her whole life, but you know, she wasn't Christian enough when we were in high school. I guess we thought that she wasn't Christian enough or something. So, so I prayed the prayer of salvation with her or whatever. And, it's really it's hard because like I sympathize with my sister. Like I understand that's hard for you. And I'm sure like when your brother found out, it must've been hard because all of that is going on. You've got he's proud of himself for what he's doing. It's what you were doing. So you're proud too, right? You know, and you're having to hold that in.
And I did. I said, "Oh, that's great." You know, I was very happy for him, and I continued to be try to be as supportive as possible. You know, of his transition into the church. You know.
And did you ever say anything to him about your
No,
beliefs?
I never openly said anything, but he knew because I stopped going. And I remember his wife, she was at our house, and her parents came over from Korea, and they wanted to go to church that Sunday. And I wasn't dressed to go to church. And she was like, cajoling me by saying, "If you don't go to church, then my father's not going to go because my father doesn't believe in God, and I want him to go to church, so you have to go." So I don't know how I got, you know, I was like, fine. So I went and got dressed, and somehow I got in the car just with her, and everybody else was in another car.
Mm-hmm.
She's like, "I don't know what happened to you, why you left the church, and what's going on with you." And I thought to her, "Listen, you don't know me from Jack. You cannot start asking me about my personal relationship with God because it's personal. It's something I'm going through, and it's none of your business."
Wow.
And after that, she just put on her lip gloss and stopped talking.
Oh my gosh. That's an intense conversation. People are very, like, rude sometimes, like too intrusive.
Too intrusive. I think, you know, I have never been that kind of person, but she was very, very intrusive. And I didn't know, I'm not very combative person, so it's hard for me to do that.
Yeah.
And so I'm feeling bad about what I just did, right? But we're quiet through the whole trip.
Oh
and
no.
Here we are, we have to go to church, and it was fine, it was done, and it was over. And then my relatives, we had a reunion with all my relatives in New York. This was about 4 years ago. And boy, did I feel like an outsider, because they were all religious. Because now, mind you, we are about 52 of us now from 11. So 52 of us are gathered in this thing, and it's all almost like a liturgical service. So we have prayers, we have the ministers in our family doing their sermons, and lots of praying. Then we all have to get up and sing a hymn, which I did, and my son was like, "What do I do?"
That's so funny. You have to coach them on like how to look Christian or how to be a proper.
Exactly. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah,
So
well, whenever we prayed as a... Yeah. Mm-hmm. Sorry, I keep interrupting you.
No. I'm sorry. What were you going to say?
No, it's just like I'm remembering when you're saying that, all the Easter Sundays and all the Christmas dinners with my family where, you know, we're sitting around and my dad or mom want to pray, and that's the tradition, and they know I'm an atheist, but they're going to pray anyway because this is what they do, and they're going to be true to their faith. And so my kids, just their whole life, I've just told them, like, if, when Grandma and Grandpa pray, just, kind of put your head down and just wait until they're done. And so they know how to do it, but it's kind of funny. Like, they've never lived that, so they don't know what to do. Yeah.
I know my son is so hilarious. So he just followed and closed his eyes and kind of looked at me and smiled, and then I would look at him and smile, and it was just an interesting situation. But I never told any of my relatives that I came out, but they must have gotten wind of it, because they would call me and say, "Oh, are you going to church? Which church are you going?" So I would lie. I would say I'm going to this, Korean church. And that's all I would, I would say I'm going to an American church. So then they wouldn't ask me anymore about what's going on. So I would say, yeah, I'm going to some American church. They're like, oh, great. And that the conversation would stop. Isn't that horrible?
Yeah, well, it's like, trying to get them off your back a little bit. It's like,
get them off my back, because then it's going to be like, well, why aren't you, and I'm not ready to really have that discussion with them.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And you shouldn't have to. It's too bad that some people, whether it be family or friends or coworkers or whoever, are just so, like, intrusive, and there's no boundaries, like you'd said earlier.
Yeah.
And they for some reason want to control your life. They want you to be a certain way, look a certain way, act a certain way.
For them.
Yeah.
It's for me. They want me to do that for them. And it's like my mother always says, oh, you're living your life, and, you're continuing what I didn't finish. And I was like, no, I'm not. I have my own purpose, my own life, my own goals.
Two totally different ways of looking at life and at children.
Yeah, and at children.
You said you wanted your son to find his own way. Your mom is wanting you to find her way.
Right. And in fact, she was a non-traditionalist, because she left her country, first one to leave her country. And she's traveled all over the world. She's done things that are not very traditional like, but she's done them, and she's lived in like 7 different countries. And so wow. For her to want me to follow tradition is just very, it's just not consistent at all.
Yeah, it's like narrow-minded or short-sighted is a better...
Short-sighted in a way.
It's just thinking about, yeah.
Okay, so now I'm like teaching for 24 years, right? And so I've been a teacher for 24 years, and in my beginning of my teaching year, I'm thinking, all kids should be saved, and everybody should be Christian. And then at the time when I left the church, my perspectives just started to change, and I started getting this hyper alert, hypersensitive awareness of all things Christian. So everything that seemed like a norm at the school suddenly became wrong. For example, like principals praying over a teacher orientation.
Oh, interesting.
Assistant principals praying. Superintendents washing the feet of their coworker.
What?
Yes!
That's crazy.
Yes!
Like, they don't even pray. Like, my high school, like, there would never be a teacher prayer ever when I was going through high school.
We're in the South, and it's like workers...
Washing their feet? Was it after hours?
Washing their feet. No. This was in a full-blown new teacher orientation meeting.
Oh, my gosh.
Where, like, thousands... I think about thousands are gathered there for their first time as new teachers. And here the superintendent is washing the feet of the person as an example of humility.
Oh my gosh. Ugh, that's so dumb.
This is the largest public school system in Georgia.
That's insane. That's crazy. Yeah, it's very different down there.
Very different. And then I had a coworker who was a teacher, a pastor. And one day he stepped on a spider, and I was like, oh, how could you kill that spider? And he said, we have dominion over them. And I was like, what? I can't believe you just said that.
Yeah.
Just different instances like that. It's just...
The subtle ways that Christianity is just like, it's like baked into our culture.
Yeah. It's
It's
baked
just,
in. And the same pastor teacher and this other Christian teacher wanted the same math position, and they both prayed for that position. Well,
and they both got it, right? Because God answered their prayers.
so one of them got it. And she said to me, God answered my prayer. And I said, well, then I guess Jean Charles didn't get it because he didn't pray hard enough. And she looked at me very baffled. And I was like, that just doesn't sound right at all. Why would God choose you over a pastor, teacher?
Interesting. What did she say to you when you said that?
She just looked kind of she just got quiet
They
and
just
didn't say anything.
they just have no self-awareness when they say things like that. It's like God answered her prayer, but does she ever stop to think like he may have not answered the prayer of somebody else, and someone else might be devastated and questioning the will of God at that very moment because their prayer was not answered, and they're devastated, but well, I guess you're okay, so things are fine.
And he was devastated. He was so
That's
devastated. He was like, I can't believe I didn't get the job. And I was like, oh, I'm so sorry. And, but all
yeah.
kinds of stuff like teachers alluding to like church and prayer during classroom, with their students and,
Yeah.
morning teacher prayer and all call to, okay, we're having a morning teacher prayer meeting this morning. It's everyone come if they want, but if you don't show up, you feel like you're not part of the group.
You're being like antisocial or something.
Antisocial. And
Yeah.
Bibles in the lounge and emails, Christian emails. And I mean, it's just so embedded and ingrained in as early on as kindergarten, because all the curriculum, if you see the curriculum, multiple choice questions, there's always a church there. There's always God there, like G is for God or C is for church. But you don't see like, M is for monk or
Or
B is for
mosque.
Buddhist or mosque.
Jay,
So it's
yeah.
very ingrained in our curriculum, and I mean, just from the start,
And
moment of silence.
it's still this way?
I'm talking about today. Yes,
Wow.
talking about
And
today.
what is the age group that you teach, if you don't mind me asking?
I teach all different grades from elementary, from kindergarten to fifth grade, because I'm an ESOL teacher, which is an English as a second language teacher.
Okay.
But I've also been a classroom teacher as well. And I've seen all the tests and it's just totally ingrained in there. It's just a part of
Yeah.
the, indoctrination of children early on. You want to get them early on.
Those are really
And
fascinating things that you mentioned. Like, just on the questions, just say, like, C is for church. Like, it seems so innocent, and it's not, you're not preaching to anybody. You're just telling the kid, oh, that's a
telling them,
word that starts with
right,
C.
right. And I've
Oh,
seen
wow.
teachers say, oh, let's talk about what you want to write about today. What about church? And if you go to prayer, I mean, if you pray, write about what you pray about. It's just very, and then the other kids start thinking, oh, what's prayer? What's church? Because I have a lot of other,
Yeah.
belief, kids who have other beliefs. And then the biggest thing that I noticed lately is called a Good News Club. And they have that in after school. It's an after school kind of program. And the Good News Club is treated very differently than the other special clubs, like the art club or the language club or the robotics club. It's announced more. It's hold back your good news, kids, because we're going to tell you when to release them. So it's always this focus. And I remember one of my students who was a Buddhist, he's Vietnamese, and he signed up for the Good News Club,
Mm.
not knowing that the Good News Club is attributed to Christian, theology, right, and
Yeah.
practices. And most of thy parents are immigrant parents. They don't know these things. They don't
Yeah.
know to read the literature when they're putting these kids in. And I said, what do you like about it? Oh, they give us treats. And I
Yeah.
was like, oh, that's all they want
Yeah.
is a
It,
treat.
yeah. That's why they're there. And
That's why they're
it's so, I've just always felt this way. It's, Christians are so deceptive and so dishonest in the way
Why
that,
not just say this is a Christian group?
Yeah.
We're going to talk about Jesus.
It,
Just blatantly out say that instead of
yeah.
making it a good news club. And when he reports back to me, he's like, "Oh, we just learned a story today."
Yeah,
You know,
he's
and
thinking
I was
nothing
like,
of it.
"Oh, okay." Yeah, and
Meanwhile, the church has systematically like trying to indoctrinate him as he's growing up. Little by little, these groups and these messages get embedded, and yeah,
and how is that okay?
yeah, it's not.
How is that okay? It's after all, it's a belief, and Chick-fil-A is big in the public school. They're on all public schools, and they're just
Wow, I
we
didn't
have
know that.
Christian music and Christmas performances. Um, and my students who are 7 years old, they'll as early as 7, they'll come up to me and say, "Miss Choi, are you a Christian?" And they'll have these spiritual conversations with me. And,
Wow.
there are very different beliefs. A lot of people believe in different things, and that's not one of them. And they're like, "You are not a Christian?" And so they just get baffled. And they're like, "But you have to know God." And so I see myself in those kids, how
Yeah.
impressionable I must have been as well to think that, you know, this belief was true.
And how important it is to them. Like they're so adamant.
It's
Like
so
you have
important
to be
and
saved.
adamant. You have
Yeah.
to be saved. God is in everything. And when they do even in their writings, they're like, God is everything. And I was like, "And how?" And he goes, "Well, And, they just assume
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
But, it's just, that's when I started kind of, I really feel that it's just, it's just not right to put on a belief system onto any child. And I don't do that to my own child. It's like, I remember my son coming home crying one day when he was 7. And he was crying because a neighbor's son, told him he was stupid because he didn't know Jesus. And so
So ironic.
he's like, "Mom, Nolan told me that I'm stupid because I don't know Jesus." And he was like in tears. And I was like, "Oh, I'm so sorry, honey. That is not true. You are not stupid." And so I went over and I said, "Hey, do you want a book on like all religions so you'll know about religions of the world and how people believe? Do you want to know about this?" And I think my support was good enough. And then he just walked away and he was fine.
That's cool. That's so funny.
It is. And then I remember when he was 10, he came home. He was like, "Mom, are we agnostic?" And I'm like, "I don't know, hon. I'm just kind of like learning on my own and I'm just going through my journey. So you have to find your own journey. I mean,
Yeah.
you decide what you believe. And I don't say in this house we believe blah, blah, blah. No, this is a house where you can do whatever you want. You believe whatever you want, you know. And I think um, I teach them a lot of critical thought
Mm-hmm.
and weigh your decisions. Um,
That's really
use
good. Yeah, it's very. I mean, that's very much like a teacher. Like helping. I like that though. It's good. It's like very much help them learn on their own. Help them figure these things out on their own. It makes them a stronger person, and it teaches them those really important life skills and critical thinking skills.
I think so. And we had a hard time with the Christmas tree for a few years. It was really hard because one year I said to him, "Do you want the Christmas tree next year?" And he goes, "Nah, I'm done with the Christmas tree." So I sold it. Well,
Oh.
the following year he was like, "Where's the tree?"
Oh no.
Oh my gosh! You told me it was. So he's like, "Yeah, I don't believe in it, but I still want the gifts and all the,
The
and I feel
traditions. Yeah.
the traditions, and that's been the most difficult of any, trying to find our own traditions and making things our own,
Mm-hmm.
and so that might have been a little trickier than anything else as
That
far as
that is Yes, that is difficult. Yeah, like having to take these Christian holidays that everyone celebrates and making it
Mm,
your own and making it secular as much as you can, or celebrating the family and the presence and making the time with family the focus, not that, God
right.
came to earth and yeah.
Yeah. And I've become like that with every holiday though. I'm like, yeah, Valentine's Day. I'm like, no, don't give me anything for a Valentine. That's all commercialized. So it's like my husband doesn't know what to get me. He's like, you know, I'm like that with Mother's Day but if they want it, sure. I'm like, I'll take them
Well,
out.
I'm kind of like that in a sense that like I want it to be from the heart. Like
Yeah,
you don't want someone to just give you something out of obligation
exactly.
or tell you
Exactly.
they love you out of obligation. You want it to come from within, and that they just thought of you and they got you this thing, and they just want to say I love you or something like that.
That's what I love about, getting out of Christianity because now I do things because I really want to do it. It's not like I'm doing it to get to somewhere else. It's not like I'm doing it because I want this reward at the end of my journey, or because
Yeah.
I'm afraid of something. It's like I've become more courageous and I feel like, you know, I just have unlimited possibilities of what I can do with
Mm-hmm.
life. You know, even, yeah. So
Yeah, that's
it's
cool.
it's a really cool state to be in.
Yeah. Well, when you think back on the kind of the most Christian version of yourself,
Hmm.
and you've gone through a really huge change. It's a very big transformation from the very Christian upbringing that you had, the parents who are so like staunchly Christian, and obviously you've transformed, you've changed a lot. But there's something good about yourself that you can look back at and say, this was always true of me. This stayed the same through my life. What's that thing for you?
I think I've always been trustworthy. That's why people just follow me, and I'm passionate, and I lead by example. I don't like shove anything in somebody's face. I just kind of lead by example, and I've always been a teacher. And I think those are the things that resonate till this day, and that's why I had people following me to church, and people who are non-believers just following me to church, and now they just follow in my life, my passions now, and
Mm-hmm.
um, like my son, he gave me the best compliment a month ago. He said, you're very inspiring to me. And I thought, for a teenager to say that to me as a parent, that's like, that's all I need to hear.
That's gold. That's what every
Isn't
parent
it
wants to
cool?
hear.
Right. And I was like, I am? Can you like expound on that?
And then he's like, I gotta go. I'm going to a friend's house. Yeah. You're like, no, no, hang on to this moment.
No, Mom, those are the 5 words I'm going to say today.
Yes, exactly, right?
That's all I need to say. And I have a friend who's like, I've known her for almost 30 years, and she's seen me go through all my transitions. And she's still Baptist and, believes in God, but she married an atheist. So she
Wow.
cracks me up. Yeah, yeah. So she married an atheist. And I remember telling her, can I talk to him? Because I've never met I know only a handful of atheists, and that's a challenge for me because I don't know any other atheist people, not
Yeah.
enough. And so I never got to talk to him, but recently she had called me and she goes, April, you are the most kindest, um, caring, and giving person that I know. And even though you don't believe in God, I feel like you're still very spiritual. And I really was really impressed by what she was saying, but she almost felt like she had to say that I'm spiritual, likening it to the Christian,
Yeah.
you know.
She had to attribute the origin of your kindness to something that was
Yeah,
divine or something that was Christian. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. But I don't feel it that way. I just have a love towards when I see nature, when I travel around the world and I see different artifacts or landscapes. I just feel this great sense of, how small I am, in this universe. And that's what I feel, connection with nature and people and animals. And I've always loved people, just in general. Like
Yeah.
people. Like even my brother says, it's like weird because you can talk to anybody and from any socioeconomic, or in any diverse situation, and you are able to talk to them. And I think it's because I have this sense of love, a natural love for people.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that was because of my Christian upbringing. We can never know that. It's not like we can, carbon copy me and then suddenly I have this life of atheism and maybe I come out to a different person. Who knows?
Well,
But
yeah. But I mean, I see so many different people who are non-religious or started non-religious that are such kind, wonderful people, good people, and they had no influence from religion or maybe had no influence from Christianity. And so when I think of the word spiritual, like I think that's just humanity. Like the spirituality that she was referring to was like your love for others, your kindness, and those are human attributes. Those are human things.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
and it is kind of neat to think that came from within. That wasn't bestowed upon me by God. That's who you are,
Right, right. And I wanted to share with you some of the Bible lessons that I've had throughout my
Oh,
life.
interesting. Okay.
So, so there are a few that resonate with me throughout my entire life. It says, "Fear not your God," and with that, I I say, be courageous and don't feel guilty about who you are. And it's not like um, you have to have this fear that somebody's going to chastise you for doing something wrong. About sexuality, I've always felt guilty. It's like all my teenage years, I've had those passions and those urges, but it was this constant fear, of somebody saying that you're doing something wrong.
Right.
And so now I just live courageously and I don't feel guilty at all about, what I do with my life as long as I don't hurt anybody.
Yeah. Which is a good rule to live by. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. And the other one is honor your husband. And that one I feel like changed me into a feminist because
You're probably not the only one, I'm guessing.
I am, because I feel like, because that the church stifled me. My friends might say differently, but for me, it stifled me.
Yeah.
But as I left the church, I felt like this, no, I can do whatever I want as a woman, and since then, I've established myself in my life to live for the purposes that I want. Like, for example, travel is my thing. So I've worked towards that and accomplished many things so I can do those things. Because I quit my job in May just recently, just to travel. So that's what I'm doing,
That's
And
really cool.
yeah. And then the other one is spare the rod. What is it? Spare the rod and something you're.
Spoil the child.
I totally disagree with that. I was beat up so badly as a child, and it didn't change me at all. But with my son, I feel like, critical thinking, reasonable consequences really work with him. I don't have to lay a hand on him. He knows when he's in trouble, he has to start getting a pencil and paper out and write down what his problem was and what his consequences are. And I think that lays the burden on him to kind of figure it out for himself and then become, come to reason, oh, yeah, this is not the right way. I did it wrong.
Yeah.
And just come to his own, but not like beat that crap out of him. And
Yeah.
I mean, I was taught so much that you have to just, and even, today I have my friends who are like, no, I have to beat one of my kids because this one, she needs to be. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So for me, it's very different. And I just totally, so what I'm saying is like, as an adult, you can rewrite your past. You don't have to continue with that, same type of bad behavior or bad rearing experience.
It's like you're looking back at those Bible verses that kind of shaped your experience, or they were examples of things that were a part
Yeah.
of your experience, and you can either say, no, I don't agree with that, or reinterpret it for your own purpose.
Hmm. Hmm.
And like you said, that's, yeah, you can kind of move forward in that way.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's what makes the next generation better, right?
Hmm.
Like trying to better that next generation or learn with the next generation. So you don't stay, I don't know, I think that's why I say I'm a naturalist and an evolutionist because I feel like I'm constantly evolving and learning. And I read a lot. I read a lot. And the other one is respect your elders. And I totally disagree with that because if they're abusive, I don't think they need your respect. They need to earn your respect. And I think a lot of children are caught in that, especially if they're under some religious, religious beliefs.
Yeah,
They
like
feel so they have to always abide by their parents, even if they're being cruelty, cruelly.
sends a very mixed message to kids who are in an abusive home, for instance, and they're supposed to
Exactly.
honor their parents and respect their elders, and maybe that's where it becomes very dangerous. Like you said, this is where a belief can really hurt people.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's where we have to be very cautious about what we tell our kids and what society tells kids.
Yeah,
Mm.
for sure. Well,
Yeah.
you know that there are a lot of people who have deconverted that listen to this podcast,
Mm.
and like the main goal of the podcast is to offer encouragement to those people. So, what encouragement or piece of guidance would you give someone who is going through this process, right now?
Yeah, I think, first of all, the nightmares never end. Like, I still have dreams and nightmares about missing a sermon or being surrounded by church people forcing me to do something. And it's a long process, it's a journey. But I think you should step out of your comfort zone, maybe take small steps. Don't try to just leap out of it and, kind of go through the journey and take small steps. Um, and use critical thinking. I mean, does your belief show compassion to all living things, other nations? Are they inclusive? Is it fair and just? Are those the beliefs? And have conversations with other experienced people and read for information. There's just so much out there. Just read. And surround yourself with positive and rational people, as rational as you can find, to have these conversations. And that is a challenge because I went to my first atheist meetup a month ago, and I found one person that I really had a good dialogue with, and we had a really great conversation with. But the second time I went to the meetup, it was more bashing of Christians and their theology, and
Yeah.
that's not what I was there for. I was really there for to kind of see, so what is it to be an atheist or a non-believer? So what do we believe? What is this? How did evolution come to be? More of a thoughtful process, and
Yeah.
it's really difficult to find because I even online that's why I was drawn to you because I and listen to your podcast, definitely. Listen to your podcast because, no, it gives really good examples of so many different journeys, so unique. But you can take away little segments of those and kind of apply them to yourself because some of these podcasts are very like, um, they're bad. I mean, they
Like angry
curse,
atheists.
angry, and
Yeah.
they look like they're still going through their journey,
Yeah.
but not in a healthy way.
Yeah, and that's definitely something. Like, I think we've all gone through a phase of anger. I
Oh
mean,
yeah,
not just
yeah.
in deconverting, but yeah, but in deconverting, yeah, we all get mad. Like, for a long time, I feel bad saying this now, but I was so mad at my mom because she's a great person, but her and my dad raised me Christian, and I was so mad at her because she was the most outwardly expressive, I guess, or
Mm,
vocal about her faith. So I guess maybe that's why when I deconverted, I fixated on her. Like, she raised me this way. Why was I raised this way? Why couldn't I have just been raised like in a secular home? Or, you know what I mean? You start, and of course I worked through that and realized like, hey, this is just the way it was. Like, people are born into all sorts of different circumstances, and mine wasn't the worst by far. And I have loving parents who still love me despite the fact that I deconverted. And so, you know what I mean? Like, it really's not, it's a pretty good situation, but yet people have to go through that phase. But if you stay in it, that's just, to me, it's so, it's not constructive. It's destructive, you know?
It is. I think it's destructive, because then you're going to be like backpedaling all the time and not moving forward. Yeah.
I really get stuck. This just brings to mind something. I really get stuck sometimes with all the negative political stuff going on in the world right now. And I always get kind of torn between, do you get angry and fight fire with fire? You know, and just like, fine, if they're going to be that way, then I'm going to be just as angry, and I'm going to get in their face and rah, you know, because it feels good in the moment to just let them have it, right?
Yeah.
But then I always, well, one, I don't think I could maintain that. Like, my personality, I don't think I could keep that up forever. But two, like, it doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel like the right way to do it. And at the end of the day, as time marches on, like, the people who did it the right way, who were peaceful or who were kind, or like, who made the world a better place, rather than, like, I guess, meeting anger with anger. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like that always ends up being the right decision in the end.
Yeah, I think so. And then, you know, and you're always going to have the most boisterous people kind of leading that, because, you know, but still, I think you can find ways to combat. I don't know how to explain. You can find ways to be constructive by putting yourself in groups of where people are trying to accomplish something and work towards that, instead of voicing it out like that. So kind of work it through. You know, be volunteer in certain sectors and do something, you know, be physically out there.
I think that's a really good advice, because doing something helps so much, to feel like you're not helpless. I think a lot of times anger is when you feel like you can't, like you're helpless. You can't do anything about your situation. But if you feel like you are taking actions to help and do something, that's really good advice, I think.
Yeah, like, you know, in this administration, I'm out there helping volunteer to get newly naturalized immigrants registered to vote.
That's awesome.
It's a small way, but still, you know, it's a way to get them started on the right step, because at that moment, they're just so excited about being American citizens. And what more excitement is there to say that now you have a power to vote? And if you do it at that second, you know, where all that adrenaline is going, that is the best time to capture them. Wait 2 or 4 years. Who cares? You know, they don't care about it anymore.
They're like the rest of us, yeah.
Most Americans who don't want to vote, you know.
Right.
Like, why don't you vote? And go, you know. So, and these are teachers that I talk to.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Kidding me. You got to get out there and vote, you know, and make it, you know, then you can't complain. You really can't complain.
Right. And I don't think we realize all the time the privilege that we have in being able to do that, you know. Having the right to vote, you know.
Right. Yeah. I think that's putting something to action is going to help, rather than being negative. And I don't think that negative energy, I don't know. Maybe that's a generalized statement.
It's hard. That's why I say I go back and forth, because sometimes I get so mad and I think like, well, if they're going to get angry and just go after us, well, then I'm going to go after them, whether it be politics or religion, you know, but then I just always feel like, no, like that kind of is why I wanted the podcast to be the way it is. Like, it's people sharing their experience rather than people ripping on Christianity. And there might be a place for that, but there's so much of it that I just don't think it's constructive all the time.
Because then you're making divisions again. It's us and them. So
Yeah.
I just don't deal with it because propaganda is so infused in many cultures, and
Yeah.
I'm not going to succeed to that.
Well, is there any resource you've found that you think would be helpful for others who are deconverting?
Well, your podcast, and of course, God is Great. God is Not Great by Christopher Hitchens.
Mm-hmm.
That's the book.
Really well written.
Very well written. I think when I saw him for the first time in 2011 on a YouTube, I was like, where has this guy been all my life? It's like he finally made everything come together for me.
Yeah. Yeah, he's one that could really go toe to toe with some of these like real strong personalities, strong religious or strong political personalities, and he would go toe to toe, and just he was so intelligent. He could just hold his own and do such a great job of debating and stuff.
Yeah. And one last thing is travel. You guys, even if it's like we're in our bubble, right? Even if we go out like 5 miles from our bubble, we can learn so much and then keep expanding that. And then for me, I make the world my campus. So every time I travel, I learn new things. And you start realizing how, like, even within the religious architecture and religious art are all infused and in other beliefs, because they are the ones who have the money. So they commission all the artists and the builders to build the structure they want.
Yeah.
It's not the artist decided to build the structure and then he's gotten, renowned for it. But can you imagine if we didn't have all those beliefs and these people were able to just take on, even from long centuries ago, what kind of creative things we would have that are just so much more interesting.
Yeah.
Because when you go to different countries, okay, here's another mosque. There's another mosque. Oh, here's another mosque. Then you go to another country. Oh, here's a church. There's another church. Oh, there's another church. By the end of the tour, you don't want to see another castle. You don't want to see another church. Because it becomes very mundane, and it really stifles your creativity.
Yeah.
And I think once you remove that, you realize, wow, how much more there is to creativity than under your religious or belief umbrella.
Yeah, that's really good. Travel's so much fun too. I mean, it's not always possible for people just because it can be expensive, but there are ways to get out there that are not as are affordable. And
you can always make it work. Like, I don't have a fancy new car. I don't have an expensive house. I still don't have a bed. I have a mattress. I don't mean to live like, you're homeless, but still, there's still ways to make it work.
You've made it a priority in your life. And I think it's awesome. I mean, traveling sounds like so much fun.
Exactly. I did. I made it a traveling part of my life. It's a priority.
That's awesome. Well, is there anything that we haven't discussed that you wanted to share?
No, Steve, thank you for this opportunity. It's been really, I'll have to kind of think about it and what we talked about and find more growth, and I really appreciate the podcast.
Oh, well, thank you. And it's been so nice meeting you, and I loved hearing your story. And it was so unique too, just like hearing about your parents and how kind of they just immigrated and just came from really difficult circumstances, and then how it shaped them, and then just how your parenting style is in contrast to theirs is really interesting. And so thank you for taking the time to do this, and I just had a lot of fun talking to you today.
Oh, you too. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Voices of Deconversion. Be sure to join us next time by subscribing to the podcast. If you'd like to learn more, check out our newsletter at vodpodcast.com.